Thank you for joining me today, Zena.
Oh, pleasure.
Okay, so I am here with Zena Amundsen, and she runs Astora Financial Services. You're in Regina, right?
I am in the
Ex-
prairies, not far from you.
Not too far, not too far. We are having a beautiful fall on the prairies, so it is
Yeah.
nice. And Zena's here today. She's a certified financial planner, divorce financial analyst, cash flow specialist, and all things amazing when it comes to women and our money, and has written this fantastic book called The Heart of Your Money. And really just wanted to engage in a conversation with you today because I think there's this huge connection between our ability to practice empathy and really kind of manage our money or get into this conversation around our money.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I've read your book, and when I read it, even though you could be a leader of different things, I completely it resonated, right? Like everything that we're talking about, and empathy, and everything that has to do with leadership management, we can pull that in and use it ourselves with our own relationship with money. So there's quite an overlap here, and the useful tools that we can use that without even realizing had been using, just kind of intuitively going through my own story. It was like, aha, yes, this is
Yeah,
it. Yeah. And
it's
it's
so
empathy.
it is, and it's so true. And I think that's what's inspired me to have these conversations. Is just one of the things I get asked the most is like, well, what does it really look like to practice empathy, and how does that show up, and is it just in leadership? And I'm just, the more I look for it, the more I find it's just woven throughout all these things that we do in our lives. So
Yeah.
um,
And so would you say empathy is love? Like there's a part in there that use that L word.
yeah, I do. I think it is. And I think for me, it's really, I believe there's this like inside practice that starts with ourself before we can go out and practice it in the world, right?
Yeah.
We we can only do outward what we're willing to do inward, and so
Yeah.
that's the piece for me. Especially when I think of my own journey around, just the money topic in general. There's so many things I loved about your book, but the one that really resonated at the end was just this encouragement or kind of call to action to really like love yourself and know you're worth it, and to take care of yourself first, right? Before
Yeah.
you kind of give everything else away. And I mean, we could apply that to anything, our energy, our time, but certainly our money. And so
Yeah.
I just wonder for you, like, what is your perspective and kind of maybe correlation between this topic of empathy and your work in money?
Yeah. We have to, I love how you said we have to love ourselves first before we can give outwards. And so part of that exploration with money is realizing where you are in that journey in your money and your story, right? And knowing where you are in that awareness. And you talk about that in your book too, about, you have to ask the hard questions to be a good leader. Well, if you're going to be the leader of your own money,
Right.
which is a call to action in itself that we all need, for many reasons. It feels empowering to take control of your money, because especially in a world right now where there's a lot of things out of control, there's things we can control, and that starts with us at home. And that's about peeling back the layer of the onion and asking all the hard questions about our relationship with money, because it has got to be full of empathy, because there's a lot of nasty things we tell ourselves in our brain. The gremlin, I call it the gremlin, and we talk about. And money is, and I say this all the time, it's the longest relationship we'll ever have in our entire life. It's longer than marriages. It's longer than our parents have known us. Like it is from our very first memory till our death,
I love
because that relationship's going to be with us the whole way. And if we can't have some empathy, it's going to be a really long journey. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
Oh, that gave me like shivers when you said relationship is going to be the longest one of your life, because it is so true, right? Even
Mhm.
when we think about, we're in our earning years now, but we're going to get into the retirement years, and then it's going to be
Yeah.
a totally different relationship with money, but it's always going to be there.
Yeah, unfortunately, the world is a little bit of capitalism. We're seeing, like we can have this balance, but there will always be an economy. That's a whole other hard conversation, but there'll always be money.
Yeah.
and need for it. There's an exchange and the history of it. And so it's going to be with us right until our last breath. How we're paying for our health care in that last breath. Let's hope we're in our late 90s and happy and have
Yeah.
lived a really good life, but it's going to be there. And so if we don't tackle this now, it can be a very painful journey. So
So what would you say? Because I know, like personally, for myself and some of the family members and friends that I have, money is one of the biggest like shame triggers, right? Like
mhm.
we don't talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. We tell ourselves all kinds of crazy things about it. Um,
Yep.
and it can be really quite shameful to even open up and say, I want to know more. Not even that I have a problem, but that I want to know more can stop people dead in their tracks. And
Yeah.
what we know about empathy is it's like the antidote to shame, right? Like it has to be, if you have empathy present, there is no shame. So how do you get past that shame trigger with your clients and
Yeah.
yourself?
W- Yeah, we have to honor our own story. And so we really do. And so coming back and saying, okay, what is my own history here and where am I coming from? Because if you can understand that little piece, and we're not talking about, having to write a whole book and journal for years about this. It can literally just spend 10 or 15 minutes thinking about this. Where did I start and what is my history and my first money memory? And I share that in my book.
Yeah.
And uh, mine is one of scarcity, and it's one of a single mom who was very poor. We had to shop at the Sally Ann, and my very first money memory. So, if I were to ask you, that very first memory is when being able to put together that there was a concept of money. It was when we had to buy these used shoes. And
Okay.
so, if you can think of your own money memory and where that came from, it's usually one of two things. It's usually either scarcity or abundance. And I've met and talked to people that have one of each. And if you can kind of figure out where you are on that scale, then there's all these pieces of the puzzle that start to come together with your own relationship with money and the history. And so we have to honor that a little bit before we go forward, because then you can stop and have that check yourself before you wreck yourself moment of the nasty talk and the shame is like, where is this really coming from? Is this my truth? And then there's a lot of tools that we can do in there to have, because really control and empowerment helps, put that shame to rest a little bit. But coming back to your very first memory of money will help you put things together.
Yeah, I love what you said, that check yourself before you wreck yourself comment. This is that's a sticky, like visceral phrase for me in terms of, yeah, because that's really what it's about. It's not going to stop the chatter necessarily, but we can understand it a little bit better. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
and
And so
and
it's like
maybe,
honoring it.
yeah, honor it and then choose to kind of, do I act from that place or can I pick a different perspective? Or, because I think going back to where we started, the relationship with money is always changing, right?
Mhm. Yep.
And
And hopefully growing to a more positive place. So this isn't something that I've just read the book, went through my own story of having to handle and get a handle on my own finances through a separation. This is ongoing. I still have it.
yeah,
And so when you talk about the money shame, I upgraded my vehicle to a little bit more luxury. And there's a story behind that. I saved for it. I drove a 1991 Toyota Previa with the roll crank window, no AC. Make sure you're home before it gets really hot in the afternoon, or you'll die if you have to be on a road trip. Like it was like just, and for me, there is a rationale and a reason, planned thought for this purchase of a vehicle, which is depreciating. So I don't recommend it, but it fit in my plan.
yeah,
And there was shame in driving it for a while. People would say, oh, like, oh my God, I love your car. You got a new car. And I'd be like, oh yeah, no, it was on sale, or yeah, thanks. And I would turn beet red, and there was shame rather than saying, thank you. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I didn't know how to do that. So
yeah.
there's shame on both levels.
It's so true.
When you
Especially
don't
when
have
you have
enough, when you
scarcity.
do have,
Yeah.
yeah.
And shame when there is abundance because somehow we
Yeah.
need to justify it, right? So
Yes.
true. So really that practice of like, yeah, this is a really big kind of inward facing empathy journey,
Yeah,
because it's not about what I think your story is around it. It's really about what is my story around it. And
that's right. And then there's little things we can do to acknowledge it. And so really it's just about practicing the acknowledgement of what am I feeling right now? Where is this coming from? And is this real? And then you shelf it and you put it on the box and you say, yeah, I saw you. We're there. I'm moving on now. And that's that practice that takes, you know, this work. And when we work with clients, it's interesting because the definition of empathy is, and you had it in your book, and it's the ability to share your emotions and other emotions. Well, when we're talking about family finance and couples coming together, wow, okay, this is where empathy has to happen. And you have to know your own story, but you also need to know your partner's story so that you can understand where they're coming from too. And so in our office, there's a lot of, geez, it's a lot of therapy. These walls, if they could tell a story, there'd be tears, there'd be high fives, there'd be crying, um, but it's honoring each other. And so we've had couples that come from a different place. And so, for example, this couple um, was one was wanting to renovate, um, and purchase a car all at the same time. And the other partner didn't want to do anything and said, listen, we don't have enough. We just need to start saving some more. We just need some more cash. Like, we can't do this yet. And this is a common story, and it might be a different thing for each,
right.
what buckets and where they're going to save and spend. But in this story, they were actually starting to fight. And I could see, each progression every time we met, there was more and more tension. And it was finally like, okay, time out. Let's go back to your very first money memory. And they shared each of their first memory and concept around money and how they were brought up. And they just looked at each other and recognition and tears and grabbed hands and said, I understand. I get it. Like, how do we work through this? Right? What's the compromise now? And that's that empathy piece for yourself, but also others.
Absolutely. And how powerful to share that, like, in the moment when we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about this, with our professional, because I think that's the thing is, this whole concept of money. I know certainly for me, and you talk about it in a lot of the work you do. Um, we're not taught this, right? It's like,
No.
I don't know. It's like some magic
And our
thing,
parents
and our parents don't know it,
don't. Yeah.
and we're not taught it in school, and it's like some magic thing we have to go figure out for ourselves, and it's like everybody's figuring it out for the first time all the time, and we don't talk about it in our social circles, in our friend groups, in our families, right? It's like, I don't know how we're supposed to learn about it.
Yeah. And we would rather, and I say this, we would rather talk about sex
Yeah.
and intimate things like that than we would about having, someone, a good friend, and say, hey, how are you feeling with your financial goals? And I
Right.
always say, it's not about opening the closet of all the money skeletons. You're not sharing. You don't have to share what you make. You don't have to share what you owe. It's just mostly like, hey, are you feeling on track? Are you feeling good about your money right now? How many times have you been asked? Well, friends and girlfriends get together and they're like, hey, like, let's go to Vegas. Of course, pre-COVID,
Right.
when it
Right.
was a little bit better, would say, hey, like, there's a girls trip and we're heading to Vegas this weekend, and do you want to come? And our first response and our first thought is, I don't want to be the only one that says I can't afford it.
Right.
And that wording in itself, it might not be that you can't afford it, but it's maybe not part of your plan or a priority. And so rather than saying that, our first thought is scarcity, like, oh, I can't afford it. But nobody says that in my circle. It's
Right.
more of a, oh, I don't know, we'll see. Or they do it and then they owe and won't talk about it after because they put it
Yes.
on the credit card.
Or they
And it's,
go, like, I've had where you go and then you don't participate because you're worried about, right? Like, we can't go to the shows,
yeah,
we can't do this, we can't go shopping.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
and,
So
and there's a way to communicate and to prep yourself and saying, like, I need to check myself and say, is this of high priority to me and of high value? Because if it is, then I can make this work. And then how do I adjust my finances to make it work? Or is it a, 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 a statement that I like people to have pre-ready and practice stay saying it, so it's not from a place of scarcity. It's like, you know what, I'm on a plan right now, and this isn't one of my priorities, and I want to allocate that for something else
Yeah.
that I find important right now, and I'd love to go, but it just isn't working right now
Yeah.
in my savings plan. And so it's about how to structure that saving and have it ahead of time, because
Yeah.
in our circle groups there is a thing of peer pressure, and you
Oh,
know, and it's
doesn't go
normal
away
even for adults.
in teenagers, right?
Yeah, and that's another thing too, is the structuring of language, so that what we're doing are little people around the house, or big people. I have big people now in my house.
Yeah.
They hear the language, and one of the ones that's really common, and I'm sure I used it until I really felt confident with this money thing and doing what I do for a living. Bit beforehand, I'm sure they heard me say, the bills come and you hold the envelope, and you're like, oh my God, I can't afford this. Like, I don't have enough to pay. Like, I can't afford this. And you put it down. You don't literally mean you can't afford it. You mean that I'm feeling tight and scrimped
Yeah.
right now. But our kids hear that. And then they actually hold on to this negative feeling around money, thinking like, oh my gosh, like we can't afford this. Like, then they start to stress for us. And so it's really about language too, because that language not only is the chatter that we hear inside ourselves, but it's also what we put out there. And so, once again, recognizing it, and then how do we put a layer of love in there, right?
Right.
How do we, yeah, have some compassion and love ourselves around this? And it's, yeah, there's so much. Yeah,
Zena, why don't you share a little bit about where people can get in touch with you, find your book? Uh, how do they
yeah.
connect?
So, Heart of Your Money, it's on Amazon. I believe you can do Kindle or Kobo as well. And you can find me through Astra Financial,
Okay.
or you can find me on zenaamundsen.ca.
Okay, excellent. Um, so what I really am taking out of this is like just how powerful that core money story is that we all have. It's really got me thinking about like, what is my first money memory, right? And I'm going to have to spend some time there, and really kind of come back to that and think about it. Um, I love what you said. So once we understand the story, we check ourselves before we wreck ourselves. That was super
Yes.
powerful. That one's going to stay with me for a while. And then really this point around like language matters, right? Like
Yep.
what we tell ourselves, the language we use, we may be saying exactly the same thing in two different ways, one from a place of scarcity and one from a place of, abundance and real kind of empowerment and self-love.
Yeah, and there's also, there's when we do cash flow planning with people, there's little things we can do as well, as when you're starting to feel like the gremlin is talking to you, and you're starting to feel that overwhelmness with money. There's little mantras. I am enough. I have enough.
Yeah.
And just saying that over enough, like I am enough and I have enough, and you got this. It's those repeated things that can help bring a little bit more light to that, and take away a little bit of the shame that we feel, because we are our worst critics inside.
Absolutely, especially around, probably the only other topic that is more shame triggering than money is probably like our health, specifically like the body image stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You're right. These are kind of two big, high ranking kind of shame triggers for most people.
yeah.
Um, Before we leave, I want to just chat a little bit about kind of what is going on in the world, right? You talked about it in terms of how uncertain things are. I mean, I don't know, what are we, 7 months into a global pandemic? The economy is just all over the place.
Yeah.
We're coming up on holiday season. This is going to be kind of our first major holiday season in this pandemic. I can only imagine, and some people have suffered some really traumatic job losses and drastic changes to their finances because of what's going on in the world. Where do you start to help somebody work through the shame and really deepen this practice of empathy right now, given what we're kind of coming up into and where we've been?
Yeah. The number one thing, so I'm going to leave you with three things that are kind of actionable things, because right now in the world, we can't control things. And there's a feeling of not empowered of that, and not knowing, there's instability and not knowing where things are going. And even if you deep down, okay, I am secure. We have our cash savings in the bank account. I have a good job right now. it's still going to start to spark some panic. There's still going to be this unknown and uncertainty that happens. And so this doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum. We're all the same people and we all need the same thing. And so the first thing that to do is in a time of feeling out of control is what can we control? And the thing you can control is taking stock of where you are. So if money and finances is going to stress you, which it does everybody right now, first thing you want to do is take stock. Where am I? How much is coming in and how much is going out? And you can actually put it to paper. There's magic when you put pen to paper and actually take a look at these things and see where you are. And here's where, okay, now you're going to see, is there enough coming in as there is going out? Then that's the first piece. Just start taking stock of everything because it's easy to feel overwhelmed and not realize, all the things that are on automatic credit, off our credit card that are coming off, not paying attention to the ins and outs because it's very overwhelming. So it's gathering that strength, sitting down, and if you have a partner, sitting down together with that partner to have strength of each other and sit down and take stock and just put it to paper.
And
And
would you,
then
sorry, before you go to number two, would you like, yeah, and my husband and I've done that various times over the years. Would you suggest like even reminding yourself of like that core money story to just deepen that sense of
yeah,
here's where we're coming from, right? Like even if
yeah,
you had the conversation for the last 20 years. Um,
yeah. Yeah, and so perfect. I love that. And in the book too, it's about the those dates, and that's where you actually you decide that you're going to sit down together, and it's away from distraction of the kids running around the house because that can add stress. So you might have to actually purposely make a date where you have each other for soul connection, and remind you, ask each other, remind me again about your first money memory. Remind me how you grew up with money
yeah.
and figure that out beforehand and then start doing it and doing it from a place of empathy. Oh, I love that.
Mhm.
That's wonderful.
Good, good. What's the next step?
Yeah, so next step is to find your support circle,
Uh,
find your money tribe, find those things. They can be things, whether it's books, blogs, newsletters that make you feel good but are educational. Um, that gives you that power of I'm getting a grasp on this. But then also you're going to have to find a leader of your money circle, and that's generally it's a qualified financial planner.
yeah.
But it's because we all need that support and coaching, and we need that third party in there. Even if you've got this, you understand the ins and outs, you've read the book. I mean, there's amazing books out there. Even advisors need advising,
Yeah.
and so we really need that coaching, and there'll be a support person for you, and they're also kind of like the mediator of these walls that can kind of bring you together if you're a couple, if you need it, or they can alleviate your fears. They've got your back, and there's somebody that you feel really good about and confident with. And so that's about kind of calling in your troops.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And I think it's so true. We need support in all areas of our lives, right? It's why we have, teachers for our kids, we have coaches for their sports, we have trainers and, you know,
yep,
therapists and coaches and doctors and all kinds of things that support us in our journey. And so it only makes sense that we have that support and that coach and that mentor when it comes to the longest lasting relationship of our lives.
yep,
Yeah,
exactly. Yep.
100%.
And in the back of my book, I actually, things to ask when you're
Mm,
looking for these people within your tribe, what you should know, compensation. You want to know exactly how they're being paid, because once you get all that stuff off the table, then it's truly a really healthy, positive relationship back and forth. And then the third thing is now executing whatever plan you need. So it means saying, okay, well, what is the plan? Is
right.
the plan a check mark? Stay the course. You're doing awesome. You're doing all the right things. Is it, oh, we could tweak a little bit here and maybe we should be putting more into our cash emergency savings just to alleviate that feel of insecurity that we have right now. Maybe we'll just top that up a little bit. But it's having a plan, because a plan with purpose is confidence. And then you put your head on your pillow at night and you're like, oh, yeah, okay, we got it. Right? We need a plan because it lets us know that we're on track, and it just makes you feel better when you can put a little check box. Yep, good, okay. Or tomorrow, or next month we're going to work on that next thing. When you think about on your to-do list has been we really need to update our will. That's a big thing right now in COVID. A lot of people are saying, oh, I hadn't even thought about it. Maybe we should actually have a will. And
Right.
so then it becomes their to-do. Well, now you've got it to do, you got an action plan, and then when you get it done and you check the box, you put it up on the shelf, and then you can high five each other and be like, yeah, we're good now for another 50 years. We don't have to worry about that.
I love that. A plan with purpose is confidence. That
Yeah,
really, really resonates.
yeah,
Ah, well, it was lovely chatting with you this afternoon. And yeah, so many parallels between, just this ability to really kind of deepen our practice of empathy as it relates to our money, and hopefully engage in some conversation, um, find that strength and that power, and kind of, yeah, get back to feeling like we can own our money story, and be
yeah,
in control of it instead of having it be something that is added to the pile of out of control things.
yeah. Bang on. Thank you so much for bringing this up, Erin, and doing this
Yeah, no
and
problem.
sharing. Yeah.
Okay, have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.